Welcome, everyone. I'm giving a presentation on how the Matthew effect has to deal with sports and if it affects sports. And yeah, um, so the Matthew effect in general is like the Matthew effect refers to the phrase the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And in the example of the picture above, you can see that good readers improve at a faster pace and poor readers improve at a slower pace. So those who do better are going to improve better, and those who do worse don't improve at all. Now we're looking at whether that is affected in sports, specifically basketball, football, and hockey. Um, but we're going to look at the chi-square test to kind of see if it is backed by that and whether or not it affects these sports. But the chi-square test is a way to perform a test basically that confirms whether independent variables are related or unrelated. So the trend basically for the two data sets, if it follows the norm or if it doesn't, then is there effect? You can read about it here. And yeah, but it's basically kind of similar to the z-score um, for the deviation, like how far it deviates. If it's positive, negative for the z-score, it's deviating from the standard line or average. And in this case, we're seeing how far the chi-squared number tells us it's off by. But we're first going to look at the US population. And like for this slide, you can obviously see that uh, August has more people born in it throughout the years. And other people like February or even November, April have not as many, couple 100,000 less. That could influence whether or not, those people who are born and what sports they play. Um, but yeah, because if you're born in January, by the time the fall comes around, you're obviously going to be a little bit ahead, and that can start to affect physical, emotional, maturity, all that stuff affects the mentality of playing sports. Um, and so now we're going to look at hockey. Now, this one is you can kind of see a trend throughout the year where January going down, not as many start. All right. And so hockey is definitely predominantly or a majority in the winter, and could probably be influenced by that. The data suggests that the earlier you start in the winter months, then uh, you are a lot more likely to go pro. You can see that the test we did was comparing the US to these numbers, and you see that the 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 chi-square test returned out 245. And so this said that there is an abnormal or it's not related to the US population. If we go back, you can see that, you know, it wasn't the highest population for that. Um, and so there's much more likelihood of famous people who are playing hockey to be born in January, February, March, the first 3 months, than rather, September, October. All right. So I assume, I believe that there is the Matthew effect in hockey looking at this data. If we go to basketball, you can see that it's kind of spread out. We start in July here, and it kind of d goes down over the years. It spikes a little bit for the fall, and then spikes right back up in the spring. There's a kind of a dead area in between these areas, like November to February and April to June. It's not as high. You can see that the Chi test returned a 13. So not a lot of deviation from the US population. we can see that, yeah, there's not a lot of effect. So I don't think for at least basketball, there is a lot of a Matthew effect of where those people who have an earlier start or those people who are born in that month, wherever they are at in their life, that they get a bigger boost. It's more probably skill based or uh it's yeah. For football, going down to football, we see that you can kind of see the trend that it is the kind of opposite. You start in April where you go up and it slowly goes up all the way to there. It hits its high peak in January and then, but it's still pretty high and then it drops super low in April, probably because, um, uh, practice starts the summer, or that spring. And so people who are already behind a year in that spring aren't as likely to play. You can see that the Chi test um, results show much higher test statistic, suggesting that the observed distribution of birth months deviates significantly from the expected distribution. And this can imply early age advantages, physical development, and um, while birth months may provide some initial benefits, other factors like talent training and opportunities probably have a bigger impact, right? You can kind of see that it's kind of in the middle. Now, looking at this, I was kind of comparing, if they did go pro, how long was their career and was there a good career? Like looking at hockey, we can see that January, where the highest amount of people who are born go to play, it's not an outstanding number of people who continue their career in that. While if you go to April or June, a lot, June and, you know, October, December, those months that weren't as high in the beginning show that there might be an outlier in those months to say that they had a lot longer career because they were the underdog. Meanwhile, in basketball, football, where the effect appears to be less influential, um, the career lengths show a more consistent trend across the birth months. And this can suggest that the birth months can impact early opportunities and maybe long-term success can still be attainable for the dedicated athletes out of the norm. Um, Kind of my conclusion of this, with all the data that I've provided, I do believe that the Matthew effect does have an effect on sports, um, where it can highlight the advantages to this professional sports and athlete development, where early births can dominate the youth programs, um, and they can favor the more physically mature players, leading to them getting more time played, play time, and then that in turn leading to the chances of turning pro. Um, while football also shows some influence, and even basketball with its lower, um, I would say that it still has a effect, but not as much as hockey and probably other sports. A broader implication suggests that there is a trend in the early years, which can suggest that, you know, the they unintentionally filter out late born talent, um, which is kind of an inequality of opportunities for these kids. I know there's a lot of politicking especially in high school, that goes into who plays and who doesn't, if you know the coach or not. And so recognizing that these effects can lead to reforms, in the talent identification and training programs, if that can change in scouting methods and it takes into consideration who had more time and who had, more preferential treatment, there is an effect in sports. Thank you. Um, thank you.